Well, hello. Well, hello. Well, hello. Hey, look, we're back.
We're back. We've never left. We've been
Whoa.
here.
Whoa. Oh, shit. I got some feedback somewhere. Hold on. No, let me get rid of that. Welcome, everybody, back to Pencil to Pencil, your favorite pandemic podcast run by master cartoonists. How great is that, Mike?
Master. Oh, really?
Well,
Where's my... I don't have my plaque.
Yeah,
Where's my plaque?
You get like a sash, like you want to.
Right, yeah.
Like
An admiral. I need one of those little admiral thingies on my shoulders.
Epaulets, is that what?
Yeah. I don't. Is that what you call those? I thought epaulets were just the little loop.
Oh, well, I don't know.
You know, like the kind that they had in the old British Navy.
Yeah.
Where they had the stuff hanging down.
You could get that Russell Crowe hat with the broom on top. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jamar Nicholas, Philadelphia's favorite son, and also the Kevin Bacon of comics, Mike Manley.
What? What? Wow.
I think the degrees of separation, they're pretty tight, right? If you think about it. I think between you, myself, and Brett, I think we have a pretty good reach over the industry.
That's right. Yeah, we control.
Like Kirby handout for that.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So also we're joined tonight by my good friend Mike Manley. Say hi, Mike.
Hi, good friend.
Before we bring our guests in, I want to do some housekeeping. Welcome, everybody. For people who are new to the podcast, what we do here is that myself, Mike, and sometimes our co-host Bret Blevins
who may or may not still join us tonight. I'm not sure.
Cool. I hope he does. We chop it up live every Wednesday and
Saturday. He's here.
Brett lost weight. Every Wednesday and Saturday night, where we talk about creativity as professional cartoonists, illustrators, animators, and other creators of that sort. And from time to time, we bring in guests. So tonight we have a really special guest, and I'll introduce him in a second. Also, let me give a plug to our sponsors. Pencil to Pencil is brought to you, as always, by Clip Studio Paint. Look up the joint up here. Clip Studio Paint is made by the lovely people at Graphicsly, who are having a half-off sale right now. And also, we're going to talk about our contest for June at the end of the program. And also, our new sponsor, Tomorrow's Publishing. Our good friend John Morrow, who helps publish Mike's magazine Draw.
Kirby Collector.
Kirby Collector.
Alter Ego, Brick Journal
right now.
Comic book artist.
So much, man. It's a mass
like every magazine about comics, basically.
Comes out of John's camp.
Except Wizard.
So give them a shout. So, all right, I want to hype up our guest. He is a very prolific cartoonist and illustrator, and I also am going to read his blurb here, even though we talked about it beforehand, but I'm going to read it because...
You have to use your NPR voice.
All right. Can you hear me?
That's better.
All right. Thank you. Bryan Lee O'Malley is a Canadian-born, Los Angeles-based writer and cartoonist. He created the New York Times best-selling, Eisner and Harvey Award-winning Scott Pilgrim series, 2004 to 2010. The series became the basis for its 2010 Universal Film and Ubisoft video game adaptation. His 2014 graphic novel, Seconds, was named one of the best books of 2014 by USA Today. He currently divides his time between writing Image Comics series SNOTGIRL and creating his next graphic novel. Ladies and gentlemen, my good buddy, Bryan Lee O'Malley. Woo!
There he is.
Hey, guys. That was really good.
Thank you, man. I put on my Terry Gross voice for you.
There you go. Yeah,
that was perfect. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on.
It's cool that you guys are doing this.
Yeah.
Mike could tell you, but I think with just having kind of a new way of looking at how much time we have on our hands, and Mike and I had talked about doing this for a couple of years, right, Mike?
Yeah, yeah. And then we started last year, but we just started with the audio. But then, it's like one of the things that's been happening over the course of even like the last couple of months. It's like everybody's doing it. There's all these new formats to do video, which is basically you just turn on your camera and then like everybody's zooming. You probably zoom, right?
I've done some zooming. I am a zoomer.
So much Zoom. Have you gotten Zoom fatigue at this point?
Not really. I don't zoom enough for the fatigue yet, but maybe I'll get there.
There was an article in the paper about that, I think a week or two ago, about like people going, "Oh, I'm so tired of zooming already,"
It's crazy, but I think just talking about earlier, I think we're just getting started. So you better get your sea legs up for Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
More Zoom to come. Before we get started, I didn't say this, but for some of the people who are new to the podcast and who are joining us live, I can't see who's watching. I just have an eyeball with a bunch of numbers next to it. So if you'd like to check in, tell me where you're from in the comments. And also, if you have a question for Brian, myself, or Mike, or Brett later, type it in. Here's the thing. I can't get to everyone, and we're going to just have a nice adult conversation. And if it fits in, I'll put it in. If not, no tears. All right? Cool. Thanks. All right. I'm going to try to manage the chat room for a second, Mike, if you want to get started.
So, how has we were just talking briefly beforehand? How has this current situation sort of affected your flow or your creativity or your projects? We were just talking about how SNOTGIRL, you had an issue out, but there's an issue in the can, right? That hasn't come out.
No, the last issue did come out March 11th, and we were going to take a hiatus after. This is the third volume, the 15th issue. Mm-hmm. So we were already going into hiatus, and it was already our fans were already annoyed, and then the pandemic started. So it's just now the hiatus is just like I have no idea how long it's going to be. I don't even know like what's happening in the comics world really. We're all kind of up in the air. So. But I've been scripting my other book, which is why that was part of the bio. I'm still working on this graphic novel. I'm scripting it right now. And I have been like scripting it in earnest since the pandemic started. Mm-hmm. It kind of like the first couple of weeks kind of felt like a Canadian winter. And like everyone just kind of shut up and left me alone for a while. And I was just like, oh, finally, like I can think, I can write. Right. And like all the crazy stuff that was happening kind of gave me some juice for a bit. But now it's just like a slog. I'm in the middle of this giant script and just gonna hopefully get it done over the summer.
Now, how do you write your stuff? Do you write it visually? Are you actually writing an actual script or are you doing a half and half? How do you break that down?
I feel like I've always been trying different things, but I kind of always end up gravitating to like a screenplay format, like because I'm very dialogue driven. Mm-hmm. So I'm just, it's not Final Draft. I'm using Scrivener, but yeah, I'm writing like a full script. I'm like 60 some pages into this script. And most of my like Scott Pilgrim scripts and stuff were probably like about 80 to 100 pages long. So I'm hoping to end up around there.
Now, it's somewhere along the way as you're working on it, if you get a visual, do you note that down as well as, as writing it? You think, oh yeah, I want to come back to this, or some expression or some, something pops in your brain, because when you start writing, I'm sure you start visualizing it in your brain, right?
Yeah, totally. All the time. Yeah, that's kind of what makes writing comics so hard. Like there's always going to be two streams. And when you're creating it, it's like a million different streams. So I'm like throwing reference images in folders and I'm doing sketches in a sketchbook and I'm doing digital sketches on the computer. And yeah, like story beats and like little character moments that I'll scribble down. It's hard to keep it organized. Like, and there's all these kind of new digital strategies for organizing shit. But yeah, I don't know. I use this program called Evernote that I've been using for probably 10 years. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's just a way of organizing. It's not very organized, but it's like something. It's a start.
Right.
Now, do you feel like you are part of the never-ending chase to find the perfect thing
right.
to help you.
Yeah, even just the perfect process, because I don't think there is a perfect process for comics, or at least I haven't found it yet. At least for graphic novels, for single issues, for shorter things, it's not that hard to kind of bounce around from outline to script to thumbnail to pages. But I've been working on a graphic novel, quote unquote, for 5 years, and I have no pages to show because I've just been struggling with the outline and the script part, and I haven't gotten to the pages part.
Did you have like a beginning, a middle, and end, and then you're kind of filling in between the pieces, or you don't have your end? How do you work that?
Yeah, I kind of had I had pretty broad strokes. I pitched this book to my publisher in 2015, and I had, in retrospect, I didn't have enough, and so I kind of like would start writing it, and they would kind of fall apart, and then as I'm writing it, like the world has been changing so much, just in the past 5 years, like all the stuff we won't get into. It's just like it's a lot to process, and the more, like, the older I get, the more I want to, like, think about the world and say about the world. It's like, and I put myself in a corner by giving this book the title Worst World, and it's and then it's like it started, the world became like just the worst, so I feel like I have to keep up with it, and it hasn't been as straightforward as I hoped it would be, but I think I'm getting there now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, in the last 5 years, things have changed in a way that if someone had told you 5 years ago this is how things are going to be, you would go, no, that's like a really bad FX movie about sharks and tornadoes or something. You would not believe. And almost daily, there's something that comes along that you go, and even though we're cartoonists and we have fantastic imaginations, we would go, I would have never imagined that.
Yeah. Or sometimes it's the opposite. Like, I would come up with a whole plot line that's like far-fetched, like villain scheme, and then that shit would happen in real life the next day, and then I have to go back to the drawing board. Like, it's preposterous, like how much bad stuff has come out in a few years, and it's so hard to kind of write like a villain story when it's all just real life is way worse.
Yeah, it's like, even like Onion articles, you're not really sure if it's real or not anymore. Right. There used to be a line, and that's kind of gone now.
Yeah, for sure.
Mal, I had a question about your writing process. So, taking something like Scott Pilgrim, where you were kind of like writing all the dialogue out, and you're basically writing for yourself, right? Like, you're the one that's going to go back and look at these notes and do your thumbs and figure out how that's all going to flow. But maybe talk about when you were working on Seconds, and did your writing process change because now you have like a different type of editorial looking at the project?
Yeah, actually, Seconds, I decided to do a totally different approach, and I just did an outline, and the outline still took me a long time. It took me like 6 or 8 months to I did like 4 or 5 different drafts of this outline. It was pretty detailed. It was only about 25 pages. And then from there, I would just do a page or two every day and compose all the dialogue and the beats like on the fly. Because I just wanted to, like I said, like there's no perfect process. So I wanted to try it that way. Because I feel like a lot of the magic happens at that stage, like where you're kind of thumbnailing and you're kind of figuring out like the timing, especially when it's supposed to be funny. So that's what I did for that book. And I initially thought I was going to do that for the new book too, but it just wasn't working, and I needed more. I needed more of a look at the dialogue, and the way it would come alive, like while I'm scripting, like is a little bit different than the way it would come alive when I'm thumbnailing.
Do they give you a certain amount of pages? Like you have to fit this in within 240 to 250, so that you have a constraint as far as you can't say now it's 400 pages.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I'm sure they would stop me at some point, but maybe it's part of just like kind of having had some success, like they didn't really give me any constraints, and that can be its own problem for sure. Like you're just kind of spinning forever. But with seconds, like I had a pretty clear scope, and I knew it would be like around 300 pages. I knew I didn't want to do a graphic novel much larger than that because it would just be too much. It would kill me, and it would. I don't really like reading books, graphic novels that are that long in one chunk. Yeah, I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, I think you did. I wanted to ask you, and you probably will hate this, to kind of go back into how you got into the industry. But one of our viewers has a good question, which kind of leads into that. So, Zach, hey, what up, Zach? Zach from Philly. Bryan, what was your inspiration for Lost at Sea, and how do you feel about that work now? Does anything set it apart in your view? Thanks, Zach.
Lost at Sea was my first book. It came out in 2003. I'm the whole screen now.
Yeah. That's right. Tuck the chin in.
Well, I'm hiding behind this mic thing. What was Lost at Sea inspired by? I mean, it's a book about like an 18-year-old. I was probably 22 when I was writing it. I guess I went to California when I was about 22 because I met I knew some guys online. This was like back in the early internet kind of era. I met some people online who were doing a comic, which was with Image. It was like kind of a studio that eventually became Udon. It developed into Udon. So I went out there to help them and work with them. And then, I don't know, I guess it was like a book about a road trip. So it's like about travel. And like, I remember traveling like to my first comic stuff with those guys. Like they lived in the Bay Area. We drove down to San Diego for my first big Comic-Con. And I don't know, I took a lot of road trips in those years. And I took a lot of road trips as a kid. So it's like kind of a road trip book and reflecting on my high school years and the moments like right after high school when you have no idea. It's like I knew I wanted to do this, but I didn't know how to get there. I was just a kid, and my skills weren't there yet. And so yeah, it's just kind of about that like kind of lost moment.
So do you look back on some of your older work, or do you put that away and not try to think about it anymore?
I think I'm the kind of person who looks at their old work like way more than some other kinds of people. I don't know. It's kind of like an anchor for me. Like it kind of just, it's like my diary. Like all the stuff I've done, like that's where I've been, and I kind of, it's part of like the personal narrative. And if I don't look at it every day. I look at Lost at Sea like once every couple of years. I looked at it recently-ish, and it always looks different. I was watching your episode with Kazu, and he was talking about how he doesn't think his books are like mature until like 10 years later. I haven't gotten that far yet. But they are different, and I definitely hate them when they're first done. But 10 years, 15 years later, like not so bad.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of almost every cartoonist is different. I know people who say they never look at their old stuff. They put it away in the drawer. They try to sell it as quickly as possible. But other people kind of study that stuff almost like an athlete studies film.
Right.
It's like, oh well, I saw what I did there. Wish I had an extra week to add to that, but I know how to make that right turn the next time.
Yeah, I think it's you also, as you mature as an artist and you gain your voice, you can go back to an older work and you can find the pieces of your voice that you are happy with, and everybody always looks at drawing and go, man, I totally screwed up that head. Why did I draw the hand like that? Oh, if I'd had 5 more minutes, I could have done. But I think it's a natural progression, especially I think for guys like you who are doing you're writing, so you're looking at it in a slightly different way than I would be, let's say, because I'm not writing my stuff. I can go back and look at an old comic and go, oh, I wish I drew that better.
Yeah.
But it's a different. You've got the whole thing. So
Yeah, so you kind of look at it in a holistic way. And yeah, with Scott Pilgrim, it's a little different because I've had to continuously revisit it, like, for professional reasons over the years, because it's just popular. And we did a reprint in color like this past decade, and I was like, yeah, some of the stuff that I was like, oh, I spent 5 minutes drawing this entire page of backgrounds, like, and I wish I had spent like at least half an hour. And then I just did that, like, on the reprint. I just like redrew some, like, a phone booth, I remember, and I was really happy that I got to redraw it. So I don't know.
You're like George
Lucas.
You're like George
Yeah,
Lucas.
exactly.
You're destroying people's childhood. Like, oh
Yes.
man.
Yeah.
Well, do you think there could be a point where, let's say, 10 years from now, that you would look back on that and go, let me get at that phone booth one more time, or is there a point where you go, all right, I think this is done, you can put it to bed?
I think it has to be kind of what it is, and the age you were when you did it. Like, you know, when I did Scott Pilgrim Volume 2, where I drew that phone booth, like, yeah, I was like 25, 26, and I could, you know, I was a hack and I could barely hold a brush, and you know, and now I'm just like I have a little more skill, but I wouldn't want to draw it like in complete detail. I wouldn't want to like CG the whole comic over. And like, fans do ask for that kind of thing. Like, you know, everyone wants like an HD remaster of everything from the past, but like, I'm not going to redraw my whole book.
No.
Yeah. I think it's at a certain point, it just sort of, it is what it is, and you move on, because then you could go back to the stuff that you did and look at that in another 10 years and go, oh man, I should go back. I think I was right the first time. You know?
Yeah, and they're definitely, like, there's one page that I kind of reworked in the reprint of Scott Pilgrim in like 2012. And yeah, I look at it, I'm like, it's not better. It's just different. It's just done 10 years later.
Yeah. I think that, and I know from also being doing painting, that painters can get trapped in that thing where they can just work on a painting. One of my teachers, he worked on a painting for 10 years to finish a painting.
Right.
And how many times they would go over that same passage or change a certain part of it. And then you really wondered, is it better? Do you think it's better? You know, would you have been better to do 10 other paintings than to continue to work on that one painting? You know, I think especially with comics, you know, would you rather have 3 more comics or gone back and redrawn your first comic 4 times?
Yeah, that's the classic thing of like the really good artists who will just do like one issue, and it'll take them a decade, and it looks great, but it's like, it takes you 5 minutes to read it, no matter how well drawn it is. So there's a trade-off in comics.
Yeah. I have a question from the room. Look at this. Austin Powers is here. Look at that.
Are you gonna do it? You got to read it in the Austin Powers accent.
yeah, baby. How did the themes and such? Maybe I'm not gonna do that. How did the themes and such? How did the themes and such maybe change or evolve when you were writing Scott Pilgrim, or did you always have an overall idea of the themes you were going to be focusing on all the way through?
I think this is like a lot of fans kind of ask like this, and it's kind of, I feel like it's a little backwards, at least for the way I work. Like, I feel like themes emerge once you kind of do the work. And I wasn't like fully thinking about the deep resonance of like every stupid joke I was writing. They kind of just like accumulate over time. And then the theme kind of states itself just by doing the pages. So I don't know. I never really thought about the themes that much.
Yeah, I think sometimes you can work on 2 levels. You work on a conscious level, then later on you may find, after you've done enough work, that there's themes that you were exploring, but you weren't consciously aware of that while you were doing it. And then later on, you'll go, oh yeah, I like to do this, or you found a connection in something that you had to kind of dig. Once you start digging that creative process, connections will occur that you're not conscious of, because it's not like playing chess. Like, yes, every move was all calculated and planned out, you know?
Right.
Yeah, I didn't have the end in sight, but then people, it's an ongoing series, so people talked about it, and I would see like people talk about what the themes were, and I was like, oh, that's what the themes are. I see.
Of
And
course.
it's like it's the dialogue. So yeah, sometimes they make you see what you didn't see or didn't plan at all, and then you can like kind of reincorporate it in, and it's a dialogue.
Yeah, I find that I've experienced some of that. You'll do a painting, and it's interesting. If you don't tell people what it's about, you let them figure out what it's about, and everybody will bring something of themselves to it, and that's what they're telling you. They're telling you about themselves when they're telling you what they see in that painting. So I would imagine in a book like this, like Scott Pilgrim, that's been around for more than a decade now, you have different generations of readers bringing you different things than the people who were reading it and commenting to you when it first came out.
Yeah, back in the day, it was live journal comments, and now it's TikTok or something. But I feel like that actually has an impact on the way people discuss things too. Like nowadays, Twitter culture is kind of like, someone states the theme on Twitter and it gets 80,000 likes. Then is that right? Did he correctly nail the theme? If everyone agrees, it becomes kind of like less of a conversation and more just like I don't even know, like just here's the statement, and you agree or you don't agree.
Now we've been talking about your artistic process. I mean, your writing process. How has your drawing process changed, or has it?
Well, it went digital over the years a little bit. Like Scott Pilgrim was all pure analog, like except for the scanning and the lettering, I guess. I did computer lettering and some computer tones. But when I did seconds, I got a Cintiq for the first time and started drawing on a screen. And I did the pencils on a screen because I just found it so much easier to kind of lay out a page and move stuff around and resize stuff, constantly like flipping to make sure symmetrical and all that. And then I started printing them out really big on blue lines and inking them, still inking them traditionally with my brush. So that's kind of what I've stuck to for the past decade or so. I hate the feeling of drawing on the computer. I hate inking on the computer. But I like the freedom of it for penciling, for roughs.
I have a question from the room. Great cartoonist Amani Latif, representing Toledo, Ohio. Who or what inspired your simplistic style? Was it inspiration or out of necessity? Thanks, Amani.
Yeah, I mean, being bad at drawing is a huge impact on my style. I realized at some point, like, I was never going to be like my heroes. I was never going to like have the technical prowess of like Jim Lee or something, or one of the like manga greats, But once I kind of started picking up the brush, like I found that the expressiveness of it was kind of compensating for the shittiness of what I was doing with it. So yeah, I don't know. I the first couple of Scott Pilgrims, I was just doing what I could. And I kind of stumbled on that big eyes with like full black irises. I remember that was because, what it came out of was some friend of mine on a forum back in the day was drawing the reindeers from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and they have those like big black eyes. And I just started kind of, and there was another book that came out around then. I think it's Frederick Peters. He's Belgian. He did this book called Blue Pill. That was he had these like huge eyes with like giant black irises, and that was kind of like, that was pretty much the only like outside artistic influence that informed it. And then just like my shoddy attempts at drawing what I wanted to draw.
Well, how do you feel about now that your style is kind of like made a cultural shift? because there are a lot of cartoonists who draw like you. So, or at least, you know, you're an influence now on young cartoonist style.
Right.
How does that make you feel?
It's good. It's good and bad. I don't know. It's cool to be kind of part of the conversation as time goes on. You know, even if people, I don't feel like I have like a lot of like direct followers. And I feel like a lot of my generation and the people kind of a little bit younger than me went out of comics, like went into animation and stuff. So you kind of see it felt there a lot more. Which was always like a disappointment to me because I'm just you know, I'm always going to be a comics person. But it's, I don't know. It's weird. It's, I never thought I would kind of be someone who kind of, I definitely see a lot of kids like kind of tracing and copying my work. And that's how you start drawing. So I think that's cool.
Right.
I have a comment / question from our good buddy Scott Kurtz. Hey, Scott. Scott Kurtz says, I just reread Seconds to reaffirm that it's okay for me to stay cartoony and still have a story that's powerful. Your work inspires, Bryan. Thank you for making it. Thanks, Scott. That was
Thanks,
nice.
Scott. Yeah, I mean, Seconds definitely, I was thinking about that, like cartooniness versus like sort of just like heavier themes and stuff. And like the guy for that was Osamu Tezuka, who's like you know, the god of manga from Japan. Like he did so many like adult works and like and kind of child oriented works. I don't know why I said it that way. But it's like always kind of cute and always kind of like, you know, the chibi characters and stuff. And that was what I wanted to do in Seconds.
Assistant Mimi just said, can y'all ask Bryan about his career starting at the beginning? Thanks, Mimi. She wants to get to the brass tacks.
Yeah.
So
chronological.
How did you started off doing mini comics? Or am I missing a piece? Like, what was the first stuff you started doing, and you know, how'd you get on the road?
I think online was kind of the first thing. Like when I first got on the internet, actually, I could back up even more to like the childhood stuff. Like, you know, when I was in middle school, I had this best friend, like, and we would just draw all the time. We had comics in the back of the class. And we were just sitting there drawing, and we drew like 100 issues of like our crappy X-Men parody on lined paper. And that's where I first remember Mike's work. It's like at that age, like we were just like, you know, the comic store was like our place. And anyway, but then like, you know, I moved around a lot when I was a kid. So I only had that friend for a couple of years. When I was in high school, I got into anime. I started kind of drawing more fan arty stuff. And then when I got online, like when I was 17, maybe that was like when we first got internet and started putting my stuff online, like got a website, like, you know, within the first year and just started sharing and just started meeting people. And so kind of like most of my like initial like comics and drawing friends like were online. I didn't really have any like real life friends who drew after middle school. And then, like I said, I went to California to join some of those friends. Like I worked on their image book in 2001, which is called Last Shot. And I was lettering it, and I was just I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was just I had like a rudimentary Photoshop skills. And they were teaching me more like every day. And I was like 21, 22. And, you know, I lettered like 4 or 5 issues of their comic. And then it was actually on the way back from there, from California back to Canada. We went to Wizard World Chicago in 2001, 2. 2000. It was right before 9. So I met James Lucas Jones, who became my editor at Oni at that convention. And started kind of pitching him stuff, and I did some drawing and inking for them, and I pitched them Lost at Sea, and I started doing Lost at Sea in early 2003.
So were you doing you were studying Tezuka, and who were you looking at besides me, and your formative your formative years. Because I mean, every artist has those 2 or 3 like major, like, oh, you suddenly discover this person and like
Right.
your heads explodes, right? So who were the guys that like exploded your head?
I didn't get into Tezuka until I was like, in my late 20s or something. As a kid, I mean, I still have a lot of my child work. It's Jim Lee was the big one, just like because he was Korean and like that was like I was like, what, like a Korean guy can like draw comics, can draw X-Men, like, and I already loved X-Men. My older cousins had like old issues of X-Men and I was kind of super hooked on it. So like X-Men was my big one. I was really into like Jim Lee and then later like Joe Madureira and that sort of thing. That was when I was in high school. And then when I got into the anime and manga, like Rumiko Takahashi was my biggest one. She was a huge influence on Scott Pilgrim. And then there's also like Archie, like all the kind of stuff that I don't think about comics, like just as wallpaper, But like recently, because of Jaime Hernandez, like I started looking into Harry Lucy, who's one of the Archie artists. And like he was my favorite as a kid, and I never knew he had a name, and it was just like, oh, this is the dude. Like this dude is a huge influence on me, and I never even knew that it existed. And I think it's the same for a lot of cartoonists with that kind of like Archie and Donald Duck type stuff, like those kind of like anonymous corporate comics that still had like so much flair.
Yeah. Did you remember? Was there like a specific issue or a specific run of a book that really sort of like sold you artistically or kind of gave you some keys that you could use? Because I mean, you had to learn how to break down pages. You had to learn like some theories on storytelling. For like a lot of guys, it's like at my age, we were growing up on the 60s and 70s stuff from the classic Marvel guys. So that sort of imprinted my idea of like how you tell a story. Especially guys like Kirby, who were very straightforward, didn't do any slashy panels or anything. Everything inside the panel was crazy and really exciting. So were there like certain issues that you would go back and look at over and over again and go, there's something here. I'm trying to get something out of here.
It's funny because like, my formative years were like the Image era, which were the complete opposite, like the horrible storytelling, like splash pages, characters like badly drawn anatomy and weird costumes, and I ate it all up. But I definitely looked back. Like I said, X-Men was always my biggest thing, and I would look back at the John Romita Jr. and the Mark Silvestri X-Men more, because they were like more grounded and more real people, and like the panels kind of made sense. And when I was a kid, like that was huge for me. And I drew a lot of comics, like I think the Archie and kind of the kids stuff also had a huge impact on me. Like I was also really big into Calvin and Hobbes, which was in its heyday when I was a kid. So just like the simplicity of those things, I think really imprinted on me too. Because I wasn't getting much storytelling wise out of the Image era and the Jim Lees and the Rob Liefeld kind of stuff, even though I loved the energy of it.
Right. I think that's what the kids were reacting to at the time. Was that there was a lot of energy that appeals, especially to teenage boys. That teenage boy energy. There's a lot of everything. You got pouches. We got all the pouches you want. You want muscles? I got muscles I got veins on top of my muscles, on top of veins.
Yeah. And then there would be a fill-in issue by Mike Mignola or something. It would be like, oh, this is terrible.
Right.
Ugly.
Right. Yeah.
And now it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Did you go ahead, Mike? Go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead.
Did you go through kind of like a stylistic shift where you're trying to do like that Marvel style in your own work, or did you just admire it from afar and keep developing your style? There's some gritted teeth pages.
Oh no, yeah, there's hundreds of pages of gritted teeth and like bulging like muscles, but it was all like ballpoint pen. It wasn't very serious. Like it was, me and my friend in middle school were just trying to make each other laugh every day in the back of class, and we had like the same 12 comics in the back of the class for years. Like we would just look at the same ones over and over. But there's definitely like a moment when I look at my old stuff, like my high school stuff. I was into the kind of the 90s, the mid 90s X-Men artists were like Chris, how do you say his name? Bacalo? I don't know. Bacalo.
Yeah.
I loved him. He was doing Generation X, and he had so much more flair and kind of more storytelling chops. And Joe Madureira, who was just like had that kind of energy and like kind of he brought that like kind of manga energy, and that was before I really got into manga. But then like that stuff started butting up against when I got into like anime and manga. Like I got really into Sailor Moon. I started trying to draw all my characters like 11 heads tall. They always got like super long legs and bodies. Like, so it was, I don't know. It took a few years to kind of like internalize that. And I was such a huge anime fan, and like later in high school, that the work from that period is just like it's anime fan art, and for the most part. But and I was also getting to like indie comics at the same time. Like Bone was huge for me.
Yeah.
And Oni Press had started at that time, and they did some really interesting stuff. I remember seeing like Charlie Adler's work for the first time. And just kind of like more naturalistic stuff and black and white stuff started to make a big impact on me.
I want to switch gears for a second, talk about music. Now, I think a lot of your fans know that you're a musician also. Where did you fit music into your cartooning life when you were younger? Was that like in the gutters of you trying to do comics, or your scene you were in?
I guess so. I kind of would always, it was just like my hobby, because comics became like my vocation like so quickly. I started playing guitar like late in high school, because actually my little sister was really big into music. She would be starting bands and having performances at the school show. So I was like a senior and she's like a freshman, and I like learned to play guitar just so I could back her up on something. I learned like 3 or 4 chords, and then I just kind of I never learned a lot more than that. Like my guitar playing is still relatively rudimentary. I did play piano when I was a kid. So when I was in my 20s, I played kind of keyboards in a couple of bands, and I don't know. I think I just always wanted to be cool, and like music seemed so cool, like whereas comics was never cool.
Music is also very immediate. Like comics is like baking. You got to go through the whole process, and then you like it or you don't. But in music, you know right away.
Yeah, like after I learned 3 chords, I could write songs, and I could feel good about it. Whereas at that time, when I was 19 or whatever, like a comic I could spend months on, it would still look like shit. So it was like, and in retrospect, the music I was making was also shit, but it's more immediate. That's definitely part of it.
There's 2 questions that are music related. I'm going to try to piggyback these. So nice. Don't answer the first one, and maybe you can fold it into the second one. So hello Samuel, says, do you listen to music / watch movies while you draw to get inspiration? So just put that in your pocket for a second.
Right.
And then our good buddy J. Robert Dean says, a lot of comic folk listen to music when they work on their books. Does being a musician make that possible? Or do you find yourself losing focus on your pages because you're lost analyzing the music? Thanks, guys.
Those are good. I listen to music. I make a playlist. I've always made a playlist for every book I'm drawing or writing, because it just helps me get in the headspace. And I get a little too sometimes I spend too much time making the playlist, not actually doing the work.
Your mixtape.
You gotta have a mixtape for every single project, because it gets you in the right exact zone. So I've always done that. and I love it. And you know, I can like go back and listen to those playlists and still kind of get back in that headspace that I had all those years ago. And then yeah, while I'm drawing, usually I'll throw on that playlist like at the beginning of the day when I need to kind of like get back in the zone, and I'll just listen to whatever. I listen to a lot of stuff. But the last few years I've been increasingly just listening to old shit and not at all interested in new. I just hit like a certain age or whatever, you know. I'm in my 40s now. I listen to mostly like the music that I liked when I was like, you know, in my teens and 20s.
Do you hold on, Mike, and then I'll give it back to you.
No.
Do you have a quiet zone? Like, do you have parts of your week where it's just like, I just want to hear the pen scritching across the paper, or do you need noise in the background?
Yeah, I don't think I need noise. I'll sit in silence, you know, a good chunk of the time. When music is more for the vibe. Like it's definitely like if I'm listening to the wrong music, I turn it off. Or if something has too many lyrics and I'm writing or I'm trying to think, like I'll turn it off. I've been listening to a lot more like kind of like Japanese ambient playlists and stuff like that this past couple of years, just because it just like calms me down.
I think you introduced me to chip tunes.
Oh yeah,
and I don't know how much of that you're still really into, but like I was really feeling that 8-bit Game Boy chirpy stuff for a while.
yeah. Sometimes it's like it's too high energy for me sometimes. But now, I mean, there's been so much of that kind of chiptune derived music over the past decade or so. Like now you can listen to like a whole kind of like chill hour of it, and you know it exists.
Yeah.
Are you a YouTube study girl?
No. Actually, like I did a Instagram live like about a month ago, maybe more than a month ago, and then they shut me down because I was listening to some music, and when I went back on, like everyone was just like, listen to the YouTube study lo-fi chill girl. So I did. That was the only time I've ever listened to it. It was like too chill for my drawing vibe. It's like it's not. I don't know. It has that like. It's just like a very peaceful like seaside vibe, and it's just like I need a little bit more oomph than that.
Yeah, there's some really interesting synth wave live channels that do the kind of same thing, but it's got a more of a different vibe to it.
Yeah, I want to dig into that stuff.
Yeah, I like. I think it's true. It's sort of like you have a style board for your art. You have a style board for music. There's certain days or certain parts of the process that you can listen to stuff. Like you can listen to stuff that has lyrics, and then you have other stuff that you don't want to hear anything that has lyrics because you want to. Maybe you're writing or something, or you're reading or something, so you don't want to hear. You want to hear more ambient stuff. And I remember I learned to appreciate opera, which I had never really listened to when Ricardo Villagran was living here with me, and he liked opera, and he also liked show tunes like Guys and Dolls and stuff. So I got to hear a lot of that stuff. And then Al Williamson liked great old movie soundtracks, but a lot of old jazz stuff. So I got to appreciate his stuff that was contemporary to him when he was 18, 19, 20 years old is very different than when I was that, or a little bit older. But, and I think I always liked a lot of different kinds of music. So, some days you want to listen to, like you said, you want to listen to Steely Dan or something because that's your favorite thing. Or I do listen to modern stuff, but I think for me, I'm using Spotify a little bit more for that. I used to go to Borders when they would have the listening stations, and you could walk around and you could listen and go, oh yeah, that. Because you're not going to spend $20 for an album where you don't, oh, that looks interesting. I don't know. It's, some movie from some country that might be cool, or, I think I heard Calaxico the first time that way, and a lot of other stuff. So now I guess Spotify kind of replaces that in a way for me, because they recommend stuff based on your algorithm. But yeah, we usually always have music during the day, but I find at night,
Yeah.
I like to listen to audiobooks.
Yeah.
Sometimes we listen to it during the day, but usually at night, if I'm working alone or I'm up really late, I'll put on an audiobook, and that somehow seems to work better than music.
What I like about Spotify is like stuff I didn't anticipate. Like it gives you the ability to do a deep dive on artists that you thought you didn't like or that you never cared about. You never would have bought a CD of theirs. And like I can listen to every Yes album, or I can like listen to like entire genres that I've just never sampled before, just because it's like it's free, it's just there.
Yeah.
So I've listened to like a lot of stuff I never ever would have listened to in my 20s, just because it's accessible and it's broadened my horizons. I don't know, I kind of love it.
I think that's what made Pandora not work for me, because it was almost there, but it's like I want to listen to exactly what I want to listen to right this second.
Like, you like that? No. Right next to it. Right next to it.
I have trouble with like the algorithm driven like radio stations and stuff. Like it'll always drive me crazy, because it's just, you're right. It's like just so close, but so far.
Mal, I have another question from Scott Kurtz. In the book Seconds, there's a guy named Jason listed as a drawing assistant. That sounds wonderful. What is a drawing assistant, and how do I get one?
I was going to bring up Jason, actually, because he would listen to very different stuff than me. I think he's maybe 5 years younger than me, and so he like actually lived with me for about 5 weeks while we were finishing Seconds. And he would listen to a lot of video game soundtracks, and he would be kind of like watching on YouTube like people playing video games and stuff, and I had no idea what he was doing. I was listening to, I remember I was listening to a lot of Drake that year, so I was like all about Drake, but he was like listening to the Final Fantasy soundtracks and stuff. So Jason he was a mutual friend, and I was looking for someone to help me with inking Seconds, because I wanted the backgrounds to be lush, but also to finish it in an amount of time that appealed to me. So he was recommended by a friend, and he's kind of got a little more of a fantasy bent to his style. He's a really good inker. And I don't know, we worked really well together, and I'm sure we'll continue to work together. He's helped out on SNOTGIRL a little bit in the background. But he's just, I don't know. I mean, it's like I love the idea of a drawing assistant, which I learned of from Japanese manga. Over there, it's like it's pretty common for people to have like a group of assistants, and because they're pumping out
system,
30 pages a week or whatever.
That
always appealed to me. I love the concept, but there's no infrastructure for that here. So with Seconds, like I got a decent enough advance that I knew I could pay someone a little bit of money. Actually, the first time I had an assistant was on Scott Pilgrim, the final volume, because we had the movie coming out, and I knew I had about 6 or 8 months to do a book if I wanted to get it out before the movie. And I thought, if the movie is really good, it'll make the book look really bad. If the movie's really bad, no one's going to want to read the book. I knew I had to finish it first. So at that time I hired a guy named John Kantz from Seattle, who is awesome. He's a few years older than me. He's this really talented kind of like, he's super into like 80s manga, and he's got this like really cool like fine line like G pen kind of style. He's really good with screen tone. So he was kind of like an old school like manga assistant for me, and he was like fleshing out the backgrounds that's Seconds. It was pretty similar. It was just like I would rough everything out. I would do the perspective, and then Jason would go in and flesh it out. And like sometimes like he would take it in like a little bit of a different direction and just bring more life to it. And some people say that makes me a bullshit cartoonist, but I think they just look good.
No, I mean I have assistants, and I have off and on, like Mimi helps me sometimes. Liang helps me a lot on the Phantom. I think that's the best way to learn. That's the best way to teach somebody. Part of it is you have to endure, as a collaborator, you have to endure the training part, because no one's ever going to come in at that stage of a young person and like totally match your style, totally match your line. So you have to go through a period of training, but I think that that's the best way to learn, because you're learning practically what you need to do. And for some, some artists, they don't want to do that. They don't want to have an assistant. The work is too personal to them, or maybe their process is. I mean, you sound like you're very straightforward. Kind of, you write it, you lay it out, you draw it, you do this. Some people are like, they're over here, then they're over there, and then their process is all kind of higgledy-piggledy. But most of the strip guys had assistants, because they were just like the manga guys. They're producing 365 strips a year. So
and they're like this big.
Right. Yeah. So it was very rare that there were guys who didn't. I mean, Kniff had a whole team of people. I don't think Frank Robbins did, but Leonard Starr, a lot of those guys did. Or they'd have a guy come in and ghost a week. Like, you're not in that position where somebody's going to come in and like, I'm going to ghost this whole volume for you. But I like being able to find an assistant, and it's actually hard to find a good assistant, because there's a lot of people that are, I call them like pretenders to the throne. They like to play a cartoonist, but it's like, you got to be in that chair like every day working. And if they can't do that, they can only work on Thursdays at 4:00.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
Yeah, it takes kind of humility, and it takes just getting the butt in the seat, but also it takes like skill, and I remember I don't remember who this was, but I tried out an assistant once, and there was just like they couldn't even ink a straight line, like, and I don't know, it was just like basic stuff. I can't be like day one, like college course, I got a book to put out. So, that it's tough.
I smeared these.
I wish there was more of like an infrastructure for it. Like, I wish we could, call up SVA and be like, give me an assistant out of your class, but I don't think it works that way.
I think there is within the cartooning community, cartoonists, there is a network of people, because I can say as a teacher, you always have, like, my assistants always came out of my students. And so you usually tell the first day of class, like, which people are like on the track and which people are like they're never going to be, they're going to be the hobbyists,
Yeah.
And so I've been fortunate enough that I've had, over the course of the last 20 years, like 4 or 5 people who I have worked with. And they were also interested in working, because you have the other people that only want to be your assistant so they can take your job.
I have a couple of things. One, I just if you've watched the show, you know that I can be the devil's advocate, and also I play the role of the layman, where I like to ask questions. Like, if I wasn't on this side of the table, I'd really want to ask people. So that period when the movie came out, and I believe like book 6 all dropped like right at the same time. It was perfect. I'm sure it almost killed you trying to get that stuff out the door. What was that period of time like for you, like mentally, where like, it was basically the O'Malley show all over comics. Like, how did you handle it?
Buildings with your art on it.
Yeah. How did you get through that?
I know, I was thinking about that the other day. Like, my first Comic-Con was 2001, and it was 2010 that Scott Pilgrim was on the side of the hotel.
Yeah.
Like, and that was not even 10 years. So, I guess I had a meteoric rise. I don't know. I mean, I was just doing the work, like, and also I moved across country in the same time period. So that was its own stress. Like, I finished Scott Pilgrim Volume 6, like in my in-laws' house on like a corner of a kitchen table because I had to sell my house before moving country to California. So I don't know. I was just focused on getting it done because I was really, like I said, I was nervous about the movie. Like whatever happened with the movie, like I knew I had to get the book out, and that was 10 years ago. Actually 10 years ago this week that I moved to LA, and the book came out about a month after. So, and the movie came out a month after that. So I don't know how I did it. Like I was like maybe 29 at that point, and no, maybe 30. So I wasn't like quite like the spring chicken anymore, but like I had the momentum, I guess, because I had been doing Scott Pilgrim nonstop since 2004, and I had the assistants, and that helped a lot. But the fact that like I wrote and drew, it's a long book. It's a 240-page book.
Yeah,
I wrote and drew that while they were shooting a movie of my stuff that I was like fascinated and I wanted to spend time on. And while I was moving across the country and stuff. So it's wild to me. It's wild to me that any of those books happened, but that one especially, like, and it came out okay. It wasn't a pile of shit. So I'm pretty happy with it. But yeah, then the book, the movie, the game, like it all happened at the same time. And it was just this weird confluence of things that I had been working towards for 7 years. It just happened to work out really well.
Did you have to create a space in your head to kind of like all this stuff that's part of you, but you have absolutely no control over, like Hollywood and how everything is going and all that other spin, but it's still part of you. It's like your kid, it's like you brought this stuff into the world. Did you have to create or think about, I need to have a space in my head where there's a wall that keeps this creative thing separate from that, because otherwise you could literally go cuckoo, probably worrying them home.
Cuckoo bananas.
And you've seen that other people, not everyone survives that well. Some people get really messed up from stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not that I'm not messed up from it, but I think, like I said, I was still kind of barreling ahead, like on the trajectory of doing the series and wanting to finish the series. So I had that going for me. It's definitely a moment when I was writing the 5th or 6th book and I found myself trying to make it sound like the movie, which it was already, in some form. Like I knew who the actors were. I knew who the writers were. I knew the voice of the script of the movie. And I found myself kind of slipping into that and kind of trying to play to that. And I had to really correct myself and get back to the original headspace. So yeah, you're totally right. But fortunately, like I had my studio that had been relatively stable, and I just and also my ex-wife was a cartoonist, and so we were just drawing all day, and we had that going for us too. That helped a lot.
She helped keep you grounded. Here, go take the garbage out, Mr. Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Mr. Hollywood.
This fucking movie is bullshit. Like, yeah, she didn't care, so that helped too. It definitely kept me real.
The tub is dirty, Mr. Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly.
Take care of that. Yeah. I know, Mal, we're going to start wrapping you up because I know you have other things to do tonight, and I appreciate you being on, but I have a couple more questions if you don't mind. A couple minutes left. So, and also I just have to say there's a lot of really nice questions and some people that want you to look at their stuff and shout out their cat and all other kind of stuff. I don't think Brian's going to get to all of that, but we really do appreciate it. And I may ask him to come back through the comments later if he has time. Stephen Petrovelli, who's a good friend of mine and a great writer in his own right. Steve from Philly, has there been a big transition from going to a writer-artist to just writer on SNOTGIRL? And does that make make Leslie's job easier or harder? Thanks, Stephen.
I mean, I can't speak to whether Leslie's job is easier or harder, but it is something I think about nonstop while writing. I'm like, is she going to like this? Oh my God. Like I stress about it way too much because it is like for an audience of one in a way. I need the artist to like it and to get it and to want to play with it. So, yeah, I don't know. It's tough. Writing SNOTGIRL is really, way harder than I expected it to be.
Mhm.
I kept changing the format of the scripts and like just trying to find like a sweet spot where it felt like enough but not too much. I never wanted to be like the Alan Moore kind of comics writer. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be that controlling to an artist. Like
Right.
I don't like drawing from a script like that.
Mhm.
The initial scripts for SNOTGIRL were so minimalistic. It was almost like poetry or something. And then over time, like I started adding more and more and more and more like panels and dialogue and notes and stuff. So I don't know. In some ways, I wish I could get back to that like super spare style because I like when the artist gets to interpret more.
Mhm.
And then I start to get too precious about it. Like, oh, how is this action beat going to play? You know, and I can't see that at the script stage, but I really want to try to control it. And I have to kind of like learn to let go.
So are you writing it as a plot or sort of a more than a plot, or is it a full script where you're breaking down the panels and what's happening in each panel, or are you leaving it a little in between somehow?
It's a full script. Yeah, initially the first couple issues were very pared down. They didn't have specific panel breaks. They would just kind of have like the action per page basically. So that's more like a plot. But yeah, now it's more like each, you know, I have every line of dialogue. I generally have the panels pretty much broken down. But I'm always open to her kind of collapsing action panel or whatever. I like that.
Mhm. All right, I have a couple other questions, and then we're going to get you out of here, sir. Our buddy Imani Latif has two questions, and I'm going to kind of compress them into one question that you can answer, which goes back to the movies. Imani says, "What was the experience like of seeing your book turned into film?" We danced around that. Did you enjoy the casting? And also, is Seconds going to film? Thanks, Imani.
I think casting was probably one of my favorite parts.
Mm-hmm.
It was in 2008, and they had like kind of a thing like this, like where they would just send me the videos of the casting videos, and it was back in the day. It was more of a primitive system, but and I was not in LA, but I got to see everyone, and some of them were like celebs were there doing like takes, and they didn't end up getting cast, but I got to see everyone, and it was just really interesting. And it was cool to like feel that they cared enough about my opinion to send me all that shit in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought the cast that we ended up with was spectacular, you know, and they've all done great things. I was just watching Avengers Endgame last night, and I was like, oh, there's my friends. So that's cool, you know. Seconds, we kind of optioned it a few years ago, and it kind of fizzled out. And I'm currently working on re-optioning it, but I don't know where it'll end up or anything.
So how long? Because we've talked to a couple other people who've had things go all the way through. You went through pretty quickly compared to some of the other stories.
Yeah.
You know, you're only talking like a couple years. Like some people are talking like 10 years, 12 years.
Yeah.
Was it pretty straight, or was there a few setbacks?
Yeah, no, it was surprisingly smooth sailing. Like, although it seemed like torture at the time, pretty much off the first book. Excuse me, I was drinking Diet Coke. Off the first book, they optioned it, Mark Platt Productions, and they brought it to Edgar Wright. He was on tour for his movie Shaun of the Dead that came out that summer. And it was summer of 2004. So his movie and my book came out around the same time. And I think by December or January, we had our first phone call. So like I've known that guy for 15 years. And we spent 5 years. Yeah. The first draft of the script was kind of not that great. And it was pretty rough. It was based on the first 3 books, and it leaked, and that almost killed the whole thing. Wow. And like, it was really annoying. It was really demoralizing. And then I did the 4th book during that kind of period when and everyone's mad, and I just sent them the 4th book, and the 4th book is probably my favorite one. Like it's a lot of fun. So that kind of rekindled it. Like, so I kind of I magicked it back to life by doing the work, and that felt good. So the movie ended up being kind of more based on a lot of the fourth book ended up in the movie because of that.
I had a question that we didn't really get to yet, but I'm a big fan of your social media presence, and your Instagram is popping. I really enjoy that. You have a lot of fan interaction. But I was wondering how you became so interested in fashion, because that's one of the great parts of your projects is that it's just infused with like youth culture. And I wonder, like, is that something that you just have a knack for, or do you kind of study or look at like different cultural fashion magazines, or where does that come from?
I guess it's evolved over time, like anything. It must have started like just from drawing Ramona, and I know a lot of Envy Adams too. So like during Scott Pilgrim, I kind of had to start paying more attention to fashion because I don't know, because I did care. I don't know when I started caring, but I didn't like the way it was usually portrayed in mainstream comics. At that time it was kind of like the jeans with the whale tail. Like that was kind of like the thing all the dudes were drawing. And it's like, girls don't do that. Like that's just absurd. So I was really I was driven by opposition to that sort of thing. Like just, I wanted to portray women more, not realistically, but just, I don't know, in a different way. And so, yeah, I started like kind of, I don't know if it was really magazines, but like once kind of like the fashion internet started happening, like there was like, I don't remember the names of things anymore, but yeah, there was like kind of like, different websites and things. Like I think there was like stuff on like Flickr back in the day, probably on LiveJournal, and nowadays it's all Instagram. But just like, just normal people sharing their outfits and whatever, and then you just kind of see what people wear, and you kind of see how people mix and match stuff, and
not necessarily
pay attention.
Not necessarily like street fashion,
Yeah. It's
but
like something a little more casual than that.
Yeah. But also, if you're doing young people that are in bands and going out, they're, especially women of that age, are very conscious of fashion, I think. So it seems like that would be part of this sort of the natural thing. They can't all be wearing that sawtooth hat forever, years later.
And then like when I was that age, like, and that was my scene, and I would just go to the shows and go to the clubs and see the girls, and like that was just what I saw, and I would try to portray it faithfully. And then as I get older, like, I'm not around young women every day of my life, but I mean, you just kind of pay attention.
Yeah. I don't think it's hard. I think some artists make it seem like it's the hardest thing in the world to figure out how kids look. Outside the window.
I think there was always that thing where there were certain movies like what was it, Titan AE or whatever that Don Bluth did, and they go like, this is what a 55-year-old guy is. This is what a 14-year-old, he has that hair, and they're like, they got baggy pants, and what else, Joe? Oh, skateboards. Yeah, they got skateboards. It's just like people who weren't teenagers when they were teenagers, trying to describe what teenagers are now.
The old man at Disney.
It's funny how that you would see that often in comics too, because in the 70s when they were drawing guys who were in gangs, they looked just like the guys in the 50s. They were wearing the same. Like whenever John Buscema drew a car, it was a Buick. And I love John Buscema, but when they would draw like gangs, they all looked like they were just out of West Side Story or something.
Well, I mean, that's why you can't just draw, you can't just learn from comics or from movies. Like you have to actually integrate the real world in some way.
This is going to be the last question because I'm honoring Mal's schedule tonight. So this is another movie question, and you can answer or not answer this if you want. The Sam Ham says, Bryan, the director behind the Scott Pilgrim movie, has stated that he would love a sequel. However, wouldn't he need your consent first since it's your IP? Thanks, Sam Ham.
I don't know where you got that.
The internet's crazy.
I mean, nowadays, like it's been 10 years, right? So like every time one of the cast members or anyone does an interview, they're like, would you like to revisit those characters? And they're like, sure. And then that gets picked up as a story that's like, they're going to do a sequel, but the movie made negative $30 million. They're not going to do a sequel. But we are talking about possibly doing an animated thing. So if I get to do that, that would be fun. Cause I don't know if I'll do another Scott Pilgrim comic like anytime soon. I got a lot of other work on my plate, but it would be fun to kind of revisit the characters. Definitely.
Now, if you could have chosen to do live action or animation, would you have rather had it animated?
Not really, because like you say, with Titan AE or whatever, Treasure Planet, like that, the 2000s and like, I don't know. I wasn't like very enthusiastic about the animation coming out of that time. So, I always kind of see my characters as real people in my head.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you don't look at your drawing and think of it as, well, I guess.
It goes both ways, but
okay. Because if I say Bugs Bunny, you actually think of a real person. You don't think of a bunch of drawings.
No, I mean that's a bunny. That's different. But I mean, when I'm creating my characters in my worlds, like I do think of them as real on some level, like in order to kind of get the juice to kind of create it. So, and then my rudimentary drawings are not meant to like represent like a specific reality, but, they become their own kind of thing. And then see, I used to be so into anime when I was a teenager, but then in later years, when I look at anime, I just think those aren't even people anymore. Like the drawings in anime just look like anime. Like the people who make anime, all they look at is anime. They don't look at real people anymore. It's just derived from like previous generations of itself. And I never want to be that. Like I want the real world to be somewhere in the mix. I don't know.
Do you feel that developing a style that is simpler, let's say, which is a design process, like the book would have been very different if you had drawn it like Jim Lee, right? The stories would, and they might not age as well.
Right.
I think one of the things about your style is that it's more neutral in that regard, which is sort of like a lot of the older cartooning styles or cartooning in general, like the Clear Line style or even some of the manga is that way, where there's some stuff like if you look at I always think of there's one my brother used to read, Fist of the North Star, that looks very like a very specific time period,
Yes.
So were you thinking about that in the way you were developing a style? Because like the Archie characters, if they didn't wear those sort of hashtag hairdos and stuff, that stuff is, I think, more neutral in a way.
I was definitely influenced by Scott McCloud because he would talk about that. The kind of the style like lets the reader identify themselves in the character more. So that always kind of like was like a, pinned above my desk metaphorically. Because he got that from manga too. So the manga that I was reading or that I loved the most, kind of the most simple drawings, and or going back to Calvin and Hobbes, like the dot eyes. I've always been drawn to that. And a lot of indie comics coming out of the 90s, 2000s, like had that sort of dot eyes, like super simple black and white look. So yeah, Scott Pilgrim was kind of like straddling those traditions, like the dot eyes, the old newspaper comics, the indie comics, and also the manga and the video game art.
Yeah, I think that I was just talking about this the other day on my Facebook pages. I think that for a while, especially in the late 80s and the early 90s, cartoony was like a bad word in comics. Like cartoony styles was like, you were not thought of as being as good an artist. So somebody like Charles Schultz, who was definitely a cartoonist, had gigantic appeal to people everywhere around the world, across all kind of cultures, age groups and everything. And he's a cartoonist, where I think there's certain as great as he was, say someone like Hal Foster was just a fantastic illustrator. That's not going to appeal, I think, to as many people because it might not appeal to a little kid, right? Where I think Snoopy will appeal, you know.
Yeah, when I was a kid, like Hal Foster definitely seemed like old fashioned and and stiff, and no matter how well drawn it was, like it wasn't for me as a kid. And Snoopy was like every day,
Right. So do you think that if you had gone back and you had drawn 6 issues in a more, I mean, even like Jaime Hernandez, it would have a different, more specific feel. Like the characters would not be quite as universal. I sort of feel the same way about The Simpsons. I think that's part of the appeal, is that they're so cartoony and so broad that you said, you can project yourself. Because I said, I think it's on one of the other podcasts, if you actually saw a much more realistic Homer strangling Bart, it would not be funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As ever, it's like it's a mix of what I could do and what I wanted to do. So it's like I kind of gave everyone in Scott Pilgrim the same face because it was the easiest to draw. Like it was really fast. And I could do it with a brush. And and that led to some people complain they all look the same, and other people just went with it. So
do you spend time drawing for knowledge or pleasure separate from drawing for work, or is it all sort of dovetailed into the projects?
I do more now, drawing to draw, and I have like more books about stuff now. So I just kind of started collecting like anything about drawing or comics, creation of comics. But yeah, during Scott Pilgrim, like I didn't draw for fun. All I drew was Scott Pilgrim pages because that's like I had to get pages out. Yeah. But the last few years, while I've been scripting and stuff, I still want to draw. I still want to like keep those muscles working. So yeah, I've been drawing a lot more studies and photo studies and figure stuff, and I've gotten a lot better at drawing. So that's nice. I don't know if it'll help me doing comics. I still want my comics to be pretty simple and fast. Like fast is kind of the main thing.
Well, I think speed comes from confidence too, though.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The level up is real, right? And I'm sure you've like seen yourself ratchet up during projects.
Yeah. Well, it's like, because now when I go back, I have to draw Scott Pilgrim stuff all the time. So when I go back and draw in my quote unquote old style, like it's like I could draw rings around that dude, but it's still fun. Like I have like a different understanding of how that style was constructed. Like I'm on a different level, but I can still kind of recapture it if I try.
All right, that's it. we're gonna let Bryan go. So
right,
Mal, is there any place you want to plug? Do you want to give a plug for your Instagram or any other social media devices where people can follow you?
Yeah, I'm basically only on Instagram. I haven't been on it a whole bunch lately, but I'm sure I'll be back in force eventually. But it's Radio Maru on there. I just Twitter. I don't really use it currently, but I am on there as Bryan Lee O'Malley.
Oh, very cool.
Are you avoiding all the churn?
Yeah, I quit Twitter a couple years ago because it just got to be too much, and I will report it is still too much. It's a lot more now, in fact. So yeah, I'm not gonna dive in full force.
Yeah, that's for the best. It's crazy out there. Well, all right, brother. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Yeah. We learned a lot, and I hope you enjoyed hanging out with us.
Good luck with
guys. This has been awesome.
Good luck with the kitties. I hope they're okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Let's see. All right, guys.
Thanks.
All right, have a great one. Thank you so much. Peace.
See ya.
Bye-bye. Well, that was a very great episode, Michael. What did you think of Bryan Lee O'Malley?
You always ask me that. What do I think? What am I going to say? He was the worst guest we've ever had. Oh my God. I'm quitting. This is the last podcast.
Well, I was very happy to kind of pull that assignment a couple of years ago when I kind of had Bryan on my short list of interviews for Draw Magazine. Because I was, kind of like a early fan of what he was doing, just because what he was kind of bringing to the table was just different than everything that was out, especially at that time. And kind of how we touched on quickly in the interview, how, his style has kind of turned into it created a cultural shift as far as the way people are creating cartoons these days. And, from then I've just been, how I am. Like, I just celebrate everybody who's making the needle move, and to watch just, his career just skyrocket. And then when that movie came out, and it was just like, wow, this is amazing. And I remember championing him even at my university job with my students. I would say, hey, listen, I know you don't even know what this is yet, but you need to go check out Scott Pilgrim. And they're like, what?
I always had in my classes that I would teach, I always had a couple of the Scott Pilgrims for the students. Because I always have like this big bag of books that I take. Right, different comics and how to draw other things, manga and different, just to give them an idea, sort of like a spread of what cartooning can be. Because not everyone's going to want to draw Wolverine, and not everyone's going to want to draw Scott Pilgrim. Right, everybody, you're going to have people in between, and I have found that people continue to love those books. So those kids that I was teaching in 2010 are probably, they're in their late 20s, early 30s now, right? Some of those people were influenced by that stuff then. So you've had generations to go through and get informed. And I feel like it's not history yet. It's still kind of live because people are still discovering, like when you read The Spirit, it's like history, right?
Right.
And there's certain things, if you read, like even Calvin and Hobbes, even though I think less kids are finding that today than did at one time, it's kind of a little bit more like on the shelf. And I think that Scott Pilgrim seems to be something like, oh, what's this? And it seems to be appeal. That's a big part of cartooning, is appeal. It's something that's sometimes it's even hard to explain, because you could sit down and say, okay, I'm going to design an appealing style. And
it doesn't work that way.
Right. And then there's some people who just have a natural appealing way of drawing things. It's sort of just like they have a magic eye or software for drawing that. So
I like that software. I like the way you said that. And I guess that's a good way of thinking about appeal, because I remember, and I don't want to turn into too much of a shill, but I remember there were very specific periods in the last couple of years, like more decades, when I started kind of like filtering out of going to the comic shop every week, because I used to be every Tuesday, Wednesday guy. And then I was just kind of like, let me just get my Savage Dragon and I'm out. I would get every month, I get my Savage Dragon and I would dip out. And then once in a while, somebody would say, hey, Jamar, maybe check this out. And I'm like,
No, I want my old man comics. Leave me alone. I'm going to go read Savage Dragon and have applesauce.
Applesauce. That's going to be our code word. Yeah, right. But when, Scott Pilgrim came out, it kind of had a glow around it. And, then like it started to pick up steam. And I was like one of those, when the book drops, I was driving to the comic shop to get it. And
that was sort of during the whole Borders Girls thing, Tokyo Pop. There was a lot of things going on in comics at the same time, where I think you were starting to have more female readers come into comics. more female artists sort of started to coming into comics. So there was a lot of changes because that was after the sort of the implosion of the direct market and everything. So that's right around the same time you would go into Borders and they would have, you know, lines of girls sitting in there
sitting on the floor reading
books.
Right?
Yeah, right. And so there was a lot of changes going on at the same time. And I think that's when we went, that was at SPX I went to in like 2005, I think.
Was that, well, we went to that together, didn't we?
Yeah. And I met Bryan there, and it was, and now that whole thing is like completely different. Like,
well, hey, you know, this is a very interesting topic. And I had asked her earlier in the afternoon if I could bring this up. But our good buddy Christine Larson, who was on the podcast last month, said, and there was no malice intended, but this brings up exactly what we've been talking about over the past 10, 12, 13 years. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't want to get it wrong, but she said, if, you know, she's like, there are a lot of cartoonists I know who didn't grow up worshiping Stan Lee or Frank Miller or Alan Moore or any of those people. And if they disappeared or didn't exist, it wouldn't change their comic book output. So what that's saying, and that's not a knock against any of those people, what it's saying is there is a definite generation of cartoonists who grew up not on Marvel Comics, and they're in the industry, and they're, you know, they're making waves. Like, you know, I can't speak for Raina, but Raina Telgemeier's stuff does not look like anything you'd see in a Marvel comic. And she's the New York Times best-selling book author right now. You know, so, and, you know, even like Bryan's stuff is totally different from everything else that we're more accustomed to. Hell, you know, I grew up wanting to be a comic strip artist. I came on to comic books later. I'm kind of part of that. And the stuff I draw doesn't look like Jim Lee drew it, you know, you know, to put that out there. So I think now we're actually seeing on the ground cartoonists who are in the game with totally different styles that aren't amalgamations of superhero mainstream books.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things I always try to show the young budding cartoonist is the history of cartooning includes all kinds of amazing artists that don't look like, you know, Jack Kirby, or don't look like,
right,
you know, don't look like that stuff at all. And I think that even when it was going on in its heyday, there were still all kinds of newspaper strips. There was all stuff going on in Europe, you know, there was stuff going on in Japan that we just were not aware of because we didn't have that sort of global culture
right
at the time, right?
Now,
anybody does anything, we totally know about it. Like, boom, it's like on Instagram or it's on Twitter. So, and I think that's cool. You don't have to like Jack Kirby, or you don't have to like superheroes. I told you, I've had students tell me like, oh, you know, I really like your stuff, but I'm not interested in reading superheroes. You know?
Amani says, my students generally aren't influenced by traditional comic books. Yeah, and you know, and Mike, you talk about that from your classes all the time. Like, they don't read Deadpool, right? Oh, they might read Deadpool, but they may not read anything else.
It's funny because this semester was very different than previous semesters because of the whole pandemic thing, and I haven't had my my operation on my leg, so I missed some classes. And there was very distinct sort of like pools of kids in the class. There were the dudes, and they were like trying to draw a Deadpool and guys with samurai swords, which what most teenage guys want to draw, right? Violence and dudes with masks. And then you had this whole other group of female students, and they were interested in comics, but they weren't interested in that stuff.
Right. Stuff. That's stuff.
That's and of course, why would they? Right. But I would not say that really most of them would know about what's coming out in the comic book store, because at 15 you're not going to the comic book store. That's just not in your wheelhouse. Right. So they're aware of it, cartooning more what they're seeing online. and they're not on Facebook, they're on Instagram or YouTube or whatever other device that has come out this week. So it's interesting to see, and also, like I say, taking a variety of stuff. So it's interesting to see what they're interested in. You know, the default sort of is the manga anime stuff, but even within that, there's different. You know, there's Death Note, and then there's Naruto, which people still sort of, that's a perennial. People still seem to like that. But then there's
even like Dragon Ball. Like Dragon Ball is huge. Yeah.
Right. And Pokemon.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't think any of this particular anybody was really into Sailor Moon or stuff. So it's funny what hole you fall into, because that's just the thing you saw, right?
Right.
So they're not going to the comic book store every week. I started going to the comic book store every week when I was 13. They never go to the comic book store, right? So the way they find out about stuff is different because your browsing habit is very different.
Sure.
You know,
and also, do you think about the stickiness of cartoon or comic book buying habits? Right. It's, you know, just kind of growing up in an internet culture where we were kind of brought up to believe, say you have a webcomic, Mike, you have to go Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And if you start falling off or you miss a week, those people may not come back. Right. Yeah. So even, you know, Lord forbid, the comic book store, like, you know, I think it's really hard to build that kind of return audience when everybody's attention is so spread thin.
I think that's the biggest challenge, honestly, I think for any artist working today, is that the technology on one hand allows us to reach so many people, but all the people we are reaching are also being reached by all these other people. So there's so there's so much flood of material coming in. And so I think it's really, the signal to noise is it's probably never been greater, you know. But I do see younger artists who are out there every day promoting and getting successful because they're updating. I do think if you don't update, you're done. I don't think people now have the time to wait. I even noticed that with some of the feedback I will read occasionally on the Comics Kingdom message board, is that even the people who've been reading the comic strips, you get one a day, right? And sometimes a week might be a day, or sometimes a week might be a week in the comic strip, depending on the story. People are very impatient for a story. They don't want to wait. They want the whole thing. You know, they want the whole enchilada all at one time, and it's almost like they've lost the patience to be able to read something that comes out
like episodically, so to speak.
Yeah, and maybe something like Dilbert, you just put a stupid joke up, put it on your refrigerator. Ha ha, that's you, Billy. You know, that's my boss at work. You know, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But the continuity is in a comic strip is a different pace.
Yeah. I think a lot about the kind of world we live in now. We talk about this all the time off camera, about we live in kind of like a microwave culture, right? There's one part of the microwave culture where is that, one, you have no patience, and two is that you also don't have patience to care for things, right? So the time and effort someone like yourself or Brian puts into like a very long project, or even me doing a 100+ page art book, which then once you get it and you go, okay, what else? And it takes you a year to do another one of those. I can't blame our society in any way for this, but say like the Netflix binging culture, watch-a-thon, let's sit down and watch 7 seasons of something and then get mad when there's not an 8th. Well, where's the rest? I want more. And I kind of put it into a nice little analogy.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. A nice little analogy where even Redbox is it. You go up to the box and you press entertainment, and entertainment comes out of the machine. right? It kind of strips away the creative because you just want the next one. And how come there's not another one? So how do we deal with that, Mike, as cartoonists?
I don't think we know how to deal with it as a society. I mean, cartooning is just one form of entertainment in our vast sea of entertainment that everybody is being a part of. You know, you're one little boat in a giant ocean of other boats. And I don't think that we as a society have matured. We don't really know how all this is really going to, I mean, you read all these articles about how it affects the way kids study, how people consume things, the anxiety that people feel. So I don't think we really know. We may not know for 50 years, 100 years. We may not know to the next generation of people how this all is going to play out. I mean, we're in the middle of it. So and never before have creators or creative people, I think, faced that the speed of delivery, the speed of exhaustion.
Yeah.
People want it faster, they consume it faster, and they want more of it. So, you know, if we could return more to, I think, a culture of reading as a big segment of what you consumed, then you would slow down, because reading, you work at the speed of your own brain. It's not pushed at you. So I think part of that is, if we as a culture read more, we would be able to move and appreciate things at a more human speed. You know, it's different reading Game of Thrones than watching Game of Thrones.
Right.
And then once you watch Game of Thrones, you go, okay, I blew, like you said, I blew through that. What's the next thing? I watched that whole season. Boom, I blew through that. Right. And so it's a little bit different. And I think that's one of the reasons why, even though I do myself consume a lot of entertainment, I see a lot of stuff, I read a lot of stuff, I find at night listening to an audiobook is, because I don't have the time to be able to read, I find it quite enjoyable. But I think because I read a lot as a kid, my brain was conditioned to take in information that way. I was read to, and then I read. If you're not read to, you don't really develop, usually I feel, as I see with younger people, that ability to read to yourself and then to enjoy things at that pace. Because if you just have everything getting pushed at you, you just get used to that speed of consumption, and then you just want more. It's like a sugar high. You just have to constantly keep that sugar high. So I think as cartoonists, as artists in the early 21st century, we're all going to be dealing with that, because you know, everybody's on Instagram now, and in 5 years, Instagram may be dead, and it'll be some other thing. Like people are doing TikTok. Like I myself have no use for 10-second videos of something. You know, like that doesn't offer me anything I find useful.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm not just going to sit there and consume 4 hours of 10-second things. That's not interesting to me.
What's the new thing? Is it Quibi or something? I think it's the same idea, but it's 10 minutes. Like you can watch anything for 10 minutes. And, you know, I think it's also just another way of reconditioning the dopamine and the serotonin and all that stuff to, you know, kind of, I think it's really dangerous, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's like short attention span theater.
Yeah, I think, like I said, we can't really predict how all this stuff is going to turn out. I don't think Steve Jobs could predict what would happen to the culture because of the cell phone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's changed the world. Really.
Yeah. So we see webtoons, I think, changing cartooning. Like you said, there's tons of these young artists out there putting out stuff that has nothing to do with the direct market, Marvel or DC, any of that stuff. None of that stuff, right? And they're all talking to each other. They're all drawing and writing for each other, completely separate from the stuff that I grew up in. And I was used to reading, which I find very exciting. And I don't think we really know how it's going to pan out because, again, Webtoons is big today. Tomorrow, Webtoons could go bankrupt and you're done, right? What happens with all that stuff that's on there, right? Go run over and put it on some other thing. So,
we call that some other tube.
Some other.
Hey, Mike, I want to start wrapping up, but I want to kind of touch on our last couple of episodes. We've had a really eclectic lineup of guests the last couple of weeks, and we haven't had a palate cleanser in like a month, right? We've just been going straight ahead, right at the wall. I really enjoyed our conversation with Kazu Kibuishi. Craig Rousseau was last Wednesday, and then tonight with Bryan Lee O'Malley. How do you think the different guests are balancing against each other? Because I think we're kind of touching on different aspects of the culture from different guests. I wonder what you thought about that.
I think to me, that's what's interesting about cartooning.
Yeah.
Even though I love, and wanted to be a Marvel comic artist or work for DC and all that stuff, I love all these other kinds of cartooning. I love animation. I love illustration. I have a great love of storytelling in all these different ways. So I think it's I don't know. It's like you don't want to eat the same food every night. You don't want to read it, right? So I think it's great. And what I hope is that it introduces the audience to artists they're not familiar with.
Yeah.
It introduces the audience to ways of working, to the budding artists out there. I hope it introduces them to people they can follow and possibly learn from or be inspired by. Like I said, I think we're right at the beginning of a great changeover, and we don't really know where it's going. But I think as an artist, the more you know, the more you're aware of your history, the history of the medium of cartooning, better off you will be, even just for your own edification.
And speaking of the future, I wanted to give a plug for our upcoming guest. And you know what, Mike? Our next Pencil to Pencil is a little off schedule, right? So our next episode is going to be not on our normal Wednesday slot. It's going to be on Tuesday, right? Because I am the keeper of the calendar. So, and guys, we need a drum roll. We got a really special one for you. I even made a little banner for it. So this coming Tuesday, we're going to have Lee Weeks on Pencil to Pencil. Mike, do you want to kind of big up Lee and talk about some of his career, just to wet the whistle a little bit?
Well, I think to most of the guys of my generation, he is a friend and a compadre and somebody that you admired. He's done a ton of great work on Daredevil and Batman, and he's just a great storyteller. Craftsman, and I think he's sort of an artist. I think that's a portal back to the greats, but his work also speaks to the contemporary audience. Yeah. So, and I just like the fact that he draws so well. So
he's amazing.
He just draws those pretty pictures. So.
Yeah, there was a great draw issue that you interviewed Lee, and it was just a fantastic article, and just the roughs, and there was some page progression in the article that was it was bananas.
Which you can go over to our sponsor tomorrow's, and you could actually get yourself a digital edition.
Yeah, see how it all works out. It's great. I'm very excited. So just mark your calendars, guys. This we won't be on air on our normal Wednesday spot next week. We're going to come to you on Tuesday, and we have.
If you miss it, it'll be on our channel, and it'll be on YouTube.
And I have to say, I'm really excited about where we're going with YouTube already, Mike. I was checking the analytics on my control, my Star Trek Enterprise board I have here. Our main traffic tonight was on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, I would also ask you, if you're new to watching us on YouTube, please subscribe. Please subscribe, because that way you'll be able to be notified whenever there's a new episode. And once we get 100 subscribers, we get our own official channel. Right, Jamar?
Yes. Yeah, we get. I think our URL changes from gibberish to an actual word.
X777442X.
Yeah. So that's why I haven't really been able to give out the URL. I just have been pasting in the links lately.
Yeah, which is something I guess is new. They didn't used to do that, but I guess now they want only serious YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess it makes sense, right? They want to see if you can actually pull it off before.
Thanks, Dave.
Before they, want to hand you the keys, so to speak. Oh, that was nice, Carla. Thank you. Yeah, so I thought this was really cool. Before I give a plug to our sponsors, I wanted to also say here, I was just reading something. Oh, so what I've been doing lately, Mike, is on the Pencil to Pencil Facebook page, right after we go off air, kind of like when you watch Walking Dead at 9 o'clock and then 10 o'clock it comes on again after. I've been putting watch parties on Facebook. So if you kind of showed up late, like a lot of people I always hear in the chat, oh man, I'm late. I was, I burned my biscuits. What did I miss? I'll put on a watch party and I'll hang out in the chat for a little bit. Maybe Mike will pop in and you can rewatch the episode just, right tonight. And just another thing for the Facebook audience, if you missed the live or you're catching this at the very end, this stuff doesn't disintegrate. There's a tab on Facebook where you click videos. All of our videos are there. So don't feel like it, turned into ash after the episode's over. You can always go back and watch.
Disintegrate.
That's right. You can always go back and watch it. So, all right, we're going to wrap this up. A great shout out to our sponsors. Pencil to Pencil is brought to you by Clip Studio Paint. 50% off this month.
You can't beat 50% off.
You can't beat it. I mean, by now I feel like everybody should have it, but if you don't, and going back to our June contest, I was going to wait a little bit longer, and I think Tuesday I'll give out the prize. If you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, the way I'm picking this month's winner, which I'm going to give out 2 licenses of Clip Studio Paint for free. Either Pro or EX. I have to talk to my handlers. I'm not exactly sure which, but all you have to do is subscribe. Just subscribe to the channel, and then on Tuesday, I'm going to randomly pick 2 of our subscribers to win the software. And every month we run another Clip Studio contest.
Off for you.
Yeah, that's they say in the street. That's free 99, Mike Manley. And also another great shout out to Tomorrow's Publishing. You can always check Tomorrow's out at tomorrows.com. And I think John's still having a special, right, Mike? Is he still running?
He's always running some kind of special. So there's always bundles you can get. And then I think starting next month, we're going to also give away a couple free digital issues.
Oh, very cool.
So we'll start doing that next month. So we will pick people, and then you'll be able to go and pick a free digital issue of Draw, any one of our issues of Draw you would like.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't wait. So, and that's great. I even have to get on that. So, all right. Yeah, I need my own. I need some brick journal. So again, one more shout out for remember this Tuesday coming up. Lee Weeks is going to be our guest on Tuesday. From our StreamYard portal, I always set reminder posts So once I set that up early in the week on YouTube, there'll just be kind of like a coming soon at 8 o'clock countdown that you can watch it on YouTube. That also populates on our Facebook pages. There's really no way you can miss this stuff, right? And also, what's really helping us, Mike, is if people spread the word, signal boost.
Yes.
Can you, real quick, Mike, talk about the importance of passing the word around?
Well, I mean, just like everything else on the internet, it's word of mouth that spreads everything, right? And so for us, I feel it's extra important that you do that, especially since we're just sort of trying to build up our audience. There's still a lot of people who don't know about the podcast. And so anything that you can do to help us helps you. It helps us continue to bring more episodes, better episodes. This is a work in progress. We try to get a little bit better, a little slicker. Next week will be eventually we'll just turn into androids.
Right. And also I forgot another plug, man, with so much going on. We're also on Twitter now.
Oh, right. Come on with us on Twitter. Send us your mad tweets.
So right after you finish subscribing on YouTube, why don't you jump on Twitter and follow us?
Is that at pencil to or not pencil to pencil? Is that pencil?
It's our Twitter handle is at @pencil_TO. So that's what it gave us. So that's what we got.
Pencil to you.
I say go pencil to you, sir. So all right.
Oh, did I lost you?
Yeah, something happened. I jumped into the Matrix. All right, let's wrap it up. So, guys, thanks.
We're both going to the Matrix, right?
Yeah. Thanks so much. This has been Jamar Nicholas from my best bud, Mike Manley. We're going to sign off. We'll see you on Tuesday. Be safe out there, and as always, wash your hands. Have a good night.